So I get to tell my version of coming to Japan. So the night before, Jesse and I had work early in the morning, and then we picked up Jesse, got all of our errands done, everything we needed to do before we were ready, picked up a few items, like, I picked up a nice little jacket, she got some pants, some nice boots that she's very happy with. And then we decided that we were just going to stick to our normal sleep schedule and stay awake all night because the trip to Japan, we were pretty sure it was going to be like an over 10-hour flight. So we're like, we'll stay up all night, and then we'll take our plane to California, and then our connecting plane to Japan, and sleep on the flight. And that'll be the best way to handle it since it's going to be so long. We'll cut out a lot of hours that way. So we go to sleep at like 3 p.m. almost. And we have an alarm set for midnight. And then I hear Katie very, worriedly at the top of the stairs go, "Is anybody down there?" And I'm like, immediately my brain is like, "We're sleeping. We're sleeping." And she's like, "So our plane's gonna be a little earlier than we thought." I'm like, "Okay, what time is it gonna leave?" "I'm texting your dad. We need to get up a little earlier." And of course, because I'm half asleep, I just go, "Katie, what time are we leaving?" Like, really bitchy, unfortunately. And so she goes, "Well, the plane's at 7:45, so we should get up and gone at 6. And I'm like, "Katie, that's when we're gonna leave anyways." But after discovering when the plane was actually gonna get there, and Jesse recommended we leave at 5 a.m, so we have plenty of time. So that meant my dad had to get up at 4:30 a.m. So first thing in the morning, we grab Esker and we go to drop him off at my dad's. My mom was surprisingly awake, so both my parents got to see me off. My dad comes, helps us all get in the car, drives to the airport. Aside from me being unable to hold still and being really irritated about having to wait, we got on our plane with no trouble. Got to the big LAX where we had that issue with the very grumpy older couple at the restaurant, where boss Kayla came out, and I was like, "There's no need for a confrontation. We'll all get seated." But then they, like James and Jesse said, they left before they even got seated. They checked in and then they just left. And if they'd just waited a little while longer, they would have gotten a tickle. So we sat around for a while in the airport waiting for our plane. Jesse and I started Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman, so I read to her in the airport while we were waiting for our flight, which I really enjoyed. We ended up getting on the flight, and there was this really cute, Japanese girl right next to us. And I tried really hard not to bother her, but eventually I just couldn't help it. I saw her playing Stardew Valley on her Switch, and I was like, common ground, a nerd. Eventually, so when you get on that long of a plane trip, the chairs are a lot more comfortable. You do have a little bit more legroom, but you can kind of stretch your feet out, but you can't really straighten your legs. So you're stuck in that seat. And the plane trip was 10 hours and 50 minutes. We traveled a total of 5,630 miles, which I was very proud of. And the reason it's so long is rather than going directly from California to Japan, you go up through Canada and across. And that way you cross the Bering Strait, and that way you're still kind of above land. So if there's any point where it's they have to make an emergency landing, which would be scary, there's somewhere to do it rather than just the middle of the bloody ocean. But after a certain point, they gave us our in-flight meal, which was surprisingly good, chicken and couscous and vegetables, and they had tiny salad and tiny potato salad and a little roll and a cookie. It was actually surprisingly good. But at a certain point, they dim the lights on the plane because they do realize, most people are going to sleep. But they have these built-in monitors in the back of the chairs, so you can watch a movie, they have live TV, they have some games on there like Bejeweled, which I thought was hilarious. So they do have entertainment. I brought a book and my Game Boy, and I was prepared, and then I was like, "Ooh, movies!" So we kind of did that instead. Jesse and I. So we've already watched Unbreakable and Glass by M. Night Shyamalan, and they had Glass on there. So we watched Glass together, and we were very careful. We're 3, 2, 1, play. Because the monitors are set up that if you turn, they get dim. So that you're not annoying whoever's next to you. You have to look at it straight ahead. So we pressed play on the movie at the same time, so we could look at each other at key moments and be like, "Oh, did you see cat or like he that was funny. So like every time the stewardess would come by, we'd like pause it and then be like, okay, 3, 2, 1. And we'd like check it and be like, oh, you're a little ahead of me, like tell me when, you know, that way we could watch it at the same time, which was fun. We looked over at Jameson occasionally because he was like right there. Most of the time he was either like playing his Switch or reading his book or sleeping. He had a little eye mask, which I was actually pretty jealous of. Katie was way over on the other side of the plane, and we could occasionally hear her making friends, so we're like, oh, she's fine. We knew of all the people on our flight who, if they were going to be alone, Katie would probably be the most fine, followed by Jessie, followed by Jameson, followed by me. But eventually, Jessie did go to sleep. She like wrapped her hoodie around herself like a mummy, was just like in her chair. And I look over and Yoshino for a while was sleeping, and she had a mask on for her eyes and then also on her mouth, and it's white, so she just looks like a very tired Japanese mummy. But eventually, like, we let her out because she needed to go to the restroom. Of course, she didn't say anything, but like we all had to go, so we're like, do you need to get up? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay, good. So Jessie went to sleep. So eventually, I started talking to her, and she was really nice. She'd been in Japan or in America for 2 years on a student visa that had expired. So she'd just come back to visit for 2 weeks because she has a boyfriend. And I was like, he better treat you nice. But we talked about our favorite video games. She really liked Final Fantasy 15. Her favorite is Ignis. And her other favorite game was Tales of Vesperia, which is also my favorite Tales of game. So we had quite a bit to talk about. Her English was really, really good. I told her in Japanese that her English was really good. We talked a little. She seemed pretty impressed that I spoke even as little as I do, which was good. But I ended up exchanging addresses with her so we can send her letters because she was very nice. She had an extra eye mask, and they're like citrus, so they're really nice. To like keep your eyes moist and cut out the light so you can sleep on the plane. And she gave it to me on our way back, and I was like, let me get your address, I'll send you something. And she was like, oh no, you don't have to, because you have to say no. Like, it's common practice, if you offer anyone in Japan, they're going to say no at least twice. But then if you ask again, they will take it. So I was like, what's something in America that you really liked, and I'll send you some. And she's like, chocolate. And I was like, all right. And she's like, you don't have to though. And I'm like, I'm putting it in my notes, send chocolate, exclamation, exclamation, exclamation. And I made sure to have her write the kanji for her name on my phone so that I can replicate it and send her letter to her with her name written properly on it so it will get to her. So I've got my first little pen pal set up. Jessie and I will write her letters, and I'll be sure to send her some chocolate because she was very, very nice. She was very, very patient with the American seatmate who would not be quiet after a certain point. I really thought I was going to sleep on the plane, but I could not get comfortable. Like, I couldn't bend my legs the way I wanted or straighten them out completely. When I found a way that worked for my legs, my back hurt. When I found a way that worked for my back, my butt hurt. So just sitting on that plane for so long, I didn't really realize, like, I knew it was going to be a long flight, but I don't think there's any way to really prepare yourself for how strenuous it is to sit still for basically 11 hours. They did have this cool thing though, on the little built-in monitor, which was our flight. You could say my flight and click it, and it would show you like a Google Maps view of our plane, like where it is and how long we had to go and how far it was. So we were up at about 38,000 feet, and it was like -50 up there, which was cool. Just over the clouds, flying for a really long time. Once we got here, you know, Yoshino went her way, and I was like, bye. And she was very, very nice. We definitely had a bit of adventure getting through, finding our trains. We were all very tired and got a little snippy with each other, mostly me. So it was like, answer my damn questions. We met this, so yeah, Katie like breezed right through the ticket thing. We stick our tickets in and then keep going because we did not see the second step of that process. And Katie is like, okay, let's look at our tickets. And like, Katie looks back at us and Jameson and Jessie and me, and we're like, we don't have any tickets, Katie. And I got like mad at her and I was like, Katie, you didn't tell us. We don't have any tickets. And she was like, well, no, you take your ticket out. And it's like, we don't know. So we had to go back. And there's this poor Japanese guy standing at the window with 2 tickets going, and we're like, oh, and he's like, white people. Immediately hands them to me, and I'm like, arigatou sumimasen, arigatou sumimasen. And then I look at Jameson, and I'm like, 1, 2, 3. And And he goes, Nibyo, and I was like, Sambyo, and he was like, huh, I'm like, hi, and he like goes over, runs over, and like opens the ticket thing, and Jameson's ticket is stuck in there, so even if Jameson had known, it wouldn't have popped out the other side, so he was doomed regardless. And I found that as long as I don't, like, get worried and nervous and be like, what am I going to say, the right thing just comes out of my mouth like magic, so that's really good. So when we're in a hurry, I'm like, yes, like, almost fluid. But as soon as I'm trying to have a nice conversation with a poor lady in a convenience store, I'm like, what?
We should do
so that was fun.
We should do walk this way.
And we've got to,
You asked some Asians.
Yeah, we asked the wrong Asians. So there was this group of girls right there, and Katie goes, you should ask them if we're at the right place to catch our train. And I went over and I'm like, sumimasen. And they kind of look at me and like, I try to start explaining that I need help with our tickets. And they go, no Japanese. And I was like, what? And they go, and she says, no Japanese in English. So I was like, English? And she goes, Chinese. And I was like, these are the wrong Asians, Katie. You sent me to ask the wrong Asians.
Fortunately, we found...
They tried to help us, but they did kind of send us in the wrong direction. So there was this guy, and we stopped, and I'm like standing awkwardly in this guy's space. And Katie is trying to figure this out, so I just kind of turned to him, and I'm like, sumimasen. And I try to explain to him, like, where do we go for this ticket? And he takes total ownership. Like, immediately goes and he's like, follow me. And he does kind of speak English, which was good. But, like, my brain had a moment. Because, like, I tried to ask him in Japanese, like, where do we go for these tickets? And he just goes, where do you want to go? In English. And my brain was like, So I had this total moment where I had to look at Katie and be like, where do we want to go? Because I'd forgotten how to speak fucking English.
He was also not Japanese.
He was not Japanese. It turns out he was from Korea,
He could
and he
speak.
lived in Japan for business.
Yeah.
And it was funny because Katie's trying to decipher this train map, and he keeps looking at it and saying in Japanese, don't use that. It's very confusing. And we're like, we know. We found out it's confusing, but it's the only hope. Yeah, give me that.
Yeah, this is the
So, this is
that
the
monstrosity.
train map everywhere.
It looks like modern art.
It
It's
does.
bad. It makes...
Yeah, like, so we're just doing our best at this point. But he was able to help us get on the right train. And
He even
then we got
argued
off.
for us
Yeah,
on our
he
behalf
argued.
with
He
a
helped.
desk clerk.
He went and talked to one of the desk clerks, and the desk clerk, he's like, this is where the Ori and Matsudo run, like, and the desk clerk's like, no, they do. So it turns out we were in the right place, but we weren't going to take the right train, because there's two kinds of trains. There's, like, the express train, which, it's the same route, it's just how fast you get there. And so we almost got on the express line when we wanted to get on the standard line, because that's the tickets we bought. The thing about Japanese trains that's really interesting, too. So American trains, they're kind of playing to the lowest common denominator all the time. So when the train stops, like, at a track station in Utah, it's gonna sit there for, like, a minute or two and give everybody, like, time to get up and gather your things and then go to the door and then open the door and then walk down the steps and then get off, and then you have to let everyone else get on. Japanese trains, they pull up to the station, the door opens, and you better get out, because in, like, 5 seconds you're gonna hear a whistle blow and those doors are gonna close. Because they do, like, announce on the train what your next stop is and what direction the doors are going to open, left or right. So you better, like, the idea is when you hear that, if it's your stop, you better move to the door immediately, because not only do you have to get out, you have to let everyone else in. So it's definitely a matter of courtesy of, like, having to, you get up and you get out and everyone else gets in, and then the train is gone less than 30 seconds. Like, it was like 15 seconds, and that's a generous estimate. They were so fast. It was very, very cool. And just watching the scenery go outside, like, just how green everything is, and it's really warm and wet. It's kind of like having a humidifier on all the time, but it's not bad at all. Oh, so Katie's standing on the train and she gets this really awkward look on her face and she starts mouthing at me, and I'm like, what? And she goes, woman next to me is watching some really hardcore porn. Just on the train, just sitting there like, doo-doo-doo-doo. And I have to say, I started, like, looking around the train as we got on the smaller train to Matsudo, and, like, I I started looking around, like, everyone's on their phones. But every time I saw someone with, like, a weird expression, like, there was this younger girl just going, like, to her phone, and I was like, are you watching porn? Like, I started being weirdly suspicious that everyone was watching porn. We saw our first guy with a beard in Japan on the train, and he did look like, I was like, that guy works a labor job. Like, he had a towel tied around his head like a bandana and the whole 9 yards. His pants were the same material as his jacket, and I was like, you work a labor job, sir. And he had 2 piercings on each ear, which is also unusual here. So it was very cool, just kind of like people watching, because the Japanese, they have a saying, and I can't say it in Japanese, because I never remember it, but it's basically, the nail that sticks out gets hammered. And as you look around, just like a group of people, you really see that. A lot of the same hairstyles, a lot of the same clothes, very businessy clothes too. You get your whites and your navies and your khaki colors, and like, that's really it. At least walking around in the train station that late, we didn't really see anyone that stuck out. We stuck out a lot, but it was very easy to see that they do have like a very cohesive culture as they move around throughout their day. So it was interesting getting to go through that. We met Nomad at the train station. He walked us to our apartment that we're staying at. I have another video of a tour of that. There's a konbini, or a convenience store, directly out our door that's 24 hours, and it's really handy because we were all kind of hungry and we knew we had to eat something before we went to bed. So Jesse and I, Jameson and Katie, kind of passed right out on the couch.
First on the couch.
On the couch.
And they were both snoring.
And Jameson's like bent over her like this, and I had to come up and I was like, Jameson, he did not fucking twitch. I like grabbed his shoulder.
He was
to try to
out.
I like grabbed his shoulder. I'm like, Jameson. And he's like, oh, and I'm like, dude, if you sleep like that, you're gonna mess up your back. Go to bed. And Katie, who's also snoring, goes, I wasn't sleeping. And I'm like,
liar.
yes, you were. I wasn't sleeping.
I wasn't sleeping though, because you went. You're like, you were snoring, and she's like, yeah, but I wasn't sleeping.
So they go. Jameson goes like directly to bed. Jesse and I walk across and get some little rice balls, which are so good, dude.
I told you.
Who knew? My favorite so far is the tuna mayo.
Yep.
Onigiri.
Dude,
that
I told you.
The best.
That's what I lived on the last time I was here. It's the only thing I understood and the only thing I wanted to eat.
A lot of the people in the convenience stores, we also stopped at the 7-Eleven in the train station so we could break our bills, because in Japan you don't use, so about 10,000 yen is about $100. So you don't just hand someone $100 and expect like a little convenience on the store to have change. So we went into there, and the lady at the thing was like, "Arigatou gozaimasu, this is your total, blah, blah, blah." And she's like so fast. I was like, holy shit. But then we go into the little convenience by our apartment store, and I felt a little bad, because like I walked in and I was like, huh, even in Japan, it's an Indian guy.
It was.
He did not speak very good Japanese.
He spoke better Japanese than me.
He said most of it in English, which was weird for my brain for a second when he told me my total in English, but then said kind of the rest of the sentence in Japanese. I was like, bro, I'm white, pick one.
It's time for day 2 now. We're gonna go get breakfast.
Time for day 2. So we're gonna go get breakfast. Okay, I rambled. Bye.